Hello, Trombone Internet. This is Chris Van Hoff, assistant to the regional manager of the International Trombone Festival. We at the festival, of course, are huge fans of the pod, and we are really excited to invite you to attend this year's 2024 International Trombone Festival at TCU in Fort Worth, Texas. Dave Begnosh is our host. We have the world premiere of a brand new double concerto for trombone and piano with the Fort Worth Symphony. We have the American Brass Quintet. We have late night jazz featuring a Latin jam session. Like, everything is happening. All the cast will be there. It's the best hang in the world, and we hope to see you there. You can register for the festival still online at www.internationaltrombonefestival.com, and it's happening the last week of May. So go register. We'll see you in Texas.
Welcome to the Trombone Retreat, podcast of the Third Coast Trombone Retreat. Today on the podcast, we welcome Brad Edwards, professor of trombone at Arizona State University. My name is Sebastian Vera, and I'm joined as always by Nick Schwartz. We had a bit of a sabbatical for the last couple weeks because, Nick, you decided to be really cool and get on that COVID bandwagon everybody's been talking about.
Yep, I caught the COVID. I can't believe it went this long. And I believe I caught it at the vaccination center. So what luck is that? So I got my first shot and then came down with COVID. So luckily it was a pretty mild case. Still wasn't very fun. I don't recommend it. I can say that. And then I ended up giving it to my wife, unfortunately. But she had an even milder case than I did. And she's fully recovered, and so am I. So very thankful for that.
I'm thankful too. You just had to be ironic and get it after getting the vaccine.
Yes.
Be cool.
Of course.
So we had a really wonderful talk with Brad Edwards. It was one of those talks where me and Nick texted each other right afterwards and we're just like, that was great. He gave a lot of wisdom about just the craft of teaching. We got into a lot of great topics with him and learned a lot about his motivations for putting out so much publishing work.
Yeah, I really enjoyed talking with him because he's just one of those people that has all these little nuggets of wisdom. And I think it's just, he made our job very easy as interviewers, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So, Nick, we've been getting a lot of emails about the 2021 Trombone Retreat, Third Coast Trombone Retreat. And we just wanted to address that we are efforting to make this happen, and we are very optimistic it's going to happen. There's still a lot of moving parts, so we can't formally announce anything yet. So stay tuned to our website, tromboneretreat.com.
Yeah, we'll blast any information we have all over the interwebs. We'll talk about it in the podcast. Any way we can get this information out. We want to make sure we do this right. We want to make sure that if we're able to have it in person, which we're very optimistic about, that we're able to do it safely and we're able to do it where everyone can feel comfortable. So keep being patient, please. And we'll get an answer out there soon, hopefully.
So, Nick, no one ever said that being a Trombone Retreat podcast listener didn't have perks.
I've always said that.
Oh, well, that's good. Because by listening to this episode, you're going to get a special offer code from Houghton Horns to get 15% off all of the Brad Edwards collection of books.
The whole canon, the Brad Edwards canon.
So visit houghtonhorns.com, where you can also browse trombones, accessories, consignment trombones, vintage trombones, mouthpieces, and shop to your heart's delight.
Use the code BRADRETREAT to get 15% off.
Enjoy Mr. Edwards.
Thanks for rescheduling again. Obviously wasn't planning on getting COVID. So
how are you doing?
I would say 80% better. Physically, I feel okay. It's more like the mental fatigue is still pretty intense.
Yeah.
But I had it light. Luckily, it could have been a lot worse.
Sure.
So we appreciate you being flexible. That's it made our lives easy. So I don't believe. Do you both know each other?
No.
I don't think we've ever officially met. No.
You're about to. So, well, Sebastian.
Thanks, Nick. So how you doing over there? Are you in Arizona right now?
Yes, that's correct. Both my wife and I have been vaccinated. I guess these days you have to immediately talk about COVID when someone asks how you're doing.
Yeah.
And we actually last weekend got on an aeroplane and flew to a place and did a concert.
I've heard of those things.
All of those
How's
things.
I remember them in the before times. So that was nice. And our two kids are in their 20s, and they're living here with us, have been for the year. And my son just got, Arizona just opened up vaccines to everybody.
Good.
So he got an appointment, and my daughter's trying to. So that'll be good.
Must be nice having your kids home all year.
It is. We just started being empty nesters, and we're kind of resigned to that. And all of a sudden, it's family dinner together every night, which is great for the soul and not great for the waistline, but whatever.
I saw some chart the other day that said like the average amount of weight people gained during this year, and it's not good.
Yeah. My wife and I have been doing that intermittent fasting thing and dropped a lot. But then family dinner took precedence, and it came right back.
Like 18 hours off, or like what sort of fasting? Just out of curiosity.
We just started skipping dinner.
Oh, wow.
We just eat because, if for a while there was like, oh, what's for dinner tonight? And I suddenly thought, nothing. And, you go to bed earlier because you're just tired and hungry and you just want to go to sleep.
and cranky.
Yeah. And then you have a nice breakfast, nice lunch. And it once your body get used to it, it was okay. It was just like, that's how it is.
Yeah, I always see the biggest difference when I skip dinner as far as if I'm trying to lose a little bit.
Yeah.
Something about just like sleeping all night on like a giant full stomach is not the greatest thing sometimes.
Yeah.
Or like eating like a European, the dinner being the lightest meal of the day.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be nice.
But let's start way back when. Can you tell us kind of how you grew up and how you came to music, how you came to trombone?
Oh, golly. My sister, I wanted to play trumpet. My sister said, no, there's too many kids playing trumpet. I said, okay. Actually, I think it was first drums. And my sister said, no, there's too many kids play drum. And so then it was trumpet, and then it was trombone. And once that was sister approved, that was that. So that was 5th grade, southeastern Pennsylvania, smaller high school. And where I caught fire was when I was 15, and I was a sort of a last-minute sub for a summer music camp in Vermont called Kinhaven.
Oh, yeah.
And I went up there literally with my Bundy beginning band trombone for a 7-week music camp. And the first night they sight read Beethoven's 5th Symphony. And I was like...
It was actually written for the Bundy trombone. I don't know if you knew that.
Well, yes, I knew that. Even at that age, I was very interested in historical accuracy,
Of course.
So that's where I kind of caught fire, was just, wow, this is actually pretty cool. And then, it goes on, different colleges and different playing experiences.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's interesting, we look at you as such like a prominent voice as a trombone professor at a university right now. But, looking at your background, you're going to the Hart School, you're going to Peabody, you're going to Cincinnati Conservatory, all very, performance heavy schools or focused. And of course, you go on to perform in the military. But when you first started setting out, when you first decided like, hey, I think I want to do this music thing, did you have kind of a certain identity in mind that you were going for?
I started my undergraduate convinced that everybody else was 10 feet tall. And I was way behind in the race, and I could never possibly catch up. Reflecting on it now, because of that summer camp, I realized, I actually might have been ahead of the race, but I was convinced that I was so far behind I could never catch up. And so I had multiple majors. I was a music management major and a trombone performance major. I was even like taking classes towards an MBA. So I was thinking, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to be able to make it. But I played in every single ensemble I possibly could. I mean, a brass quintet, a modern music group, an early music group, orchestra, everything, jazz band. I was just like, I'm going to play as much as I can. Because in my mind, there's like, this is pretty much it. After this, I'm going to go over to the dark side of the force and join management. And I got to the end of that, and I thought, I remember this very clearly. I thought, if I don't at least give it a try, I'll never be able to enjoy a concert again, because I'll be sitting in the audience looking at the people on stage and saying, maybe I could have been one of those people. I had to try. So it was sort of like getting on a diving board over an empty swimming pool and say, here goes. And I'm just going to dive. And so I went for my master's in performance and just started practicing like crazy. I wish I could go back in time and grab that guy by the shirt and say, here are the really dumb things that you're doing.
Don't we all?
Yeah, man. But I mean, I did end up, right at the end of my master's, getting a job with a military band, and at that point, my mindset was, I'm not going to do a military band. But then, I fell in love and with a certain horn player, and we had a pact that if there were ever openings, horn and trombone in close proximity, we had to do it. And they had a horn opening and a trombone opening. So there we go. Took the audition, and that's how things developed.
Were you in Cincinnati at the time when you took that audition?
Correct. Yeah, I
So
studied
just straight from school.
Straight from school. Yeah, I hadn't finished my comps yet. I had to drive back in a really bad snowstorm to take my comps. It was those things you tell your kids not to do. Like if it's snowing so hard that you can't actually see the road in front of you, and your wife has to roll down the window and tell you the guardrail is getting closer or farther. Yeah, it's like you have to go back and take the test. You can't stop. So yeah.
I mean, knowing myself when I was that age, part of me, I'd be curious what you were thinking. Part of me would be like, I just want a job. I really don't want to drive back in a blizzard and take these tests right now.
Right.
Did any part of you be like,
I wanted to finish it. I wanted to get it done and just put a check mark by it.
Yeah, you were 99% of the way there. You might as well just
just take that one last step. And that school, like a lot of schools, they make you charge a fee for what they call continuing enrollment. And I was like, well, I'm not going to pay that every semester. I'm going to go clear this thing out and be done with it.
So what was your Air Force experience like?
It was, I remember saying to people that I felt like the military and music were like oil and water. They can coexist in the same space, but they can never truly mix. And it was, I'm a lot of it, you're playing patriotic stuff, and it to you, it feels a little schlocky. Like here we are playing Wind Beneath My Wings for the 74th time.
That's Nick's favorite song, though.
that is a good song, I got to say.
But then, there's another side of it, which is, when you get on these tours and you go into a little town and you see people pouring out and to go to a concert, people that would never go to a concert if it were not a military band. And they are there all together, and you're playing this patriotic stuff that you're like, here we go again. And you look in the audience and you see guys crying. You're like, wow, I guess we're having an effect here. So, I think it came down to what was your mindset going into it. If you realize that, you actually are performing a service and doing something for people that would otherwise not go to an orchestra concert or anything like that, then it's like, yeah, that's good. I can do that. Got to tell a story, though. Got to tell a story.
Please.
You can't talk about the Air Force Band without having at least one good story. I've got a bunch. And a shout out to Lindsey Smith. No, I'm not going to tell that story, so we'll just let that one sit.
Now I want you to tell that story, whatever it is.
Oh, he likes to embarrass me about it. But no, the one I'm going to tell is we were in, I think, Tennessee at Middle Tennessee State University. And
Murfreesboro.
Yeah, man. And then,
Whoa.
And of course, like a lot of cases, we the bus would drive past the art center on the way to the gym because you can hold more people in the gym. And so we're there on the basketball court, and they had programmed the Hinastera Harp Concerto for harp and military band in a basketball court, because why not? The harp is amplified. And so we're in the middle. It's a good piece, actually. And so we're playing it. And all of a sudden, halfway through the piece, people start standing up. I was like, what? And then they start turning around. And then they start clapping. It's like, we're still going here. We're over here. And what was happening was right down the middle aisle was Miss Tennessee. And she was sashaying down those steps and waving to everyone and smiling. And they were all clapping for her. And we're like, so we're just like the house band? And
she's like, this is my song. I got to strut.
Yeah.
So a special moment in my life.
Hey, my first job ever was bussing tables, and the waitress at this restaurant was Miss Michigan.
There you go. Yeah.
So, hey, there you go.
Before or after the crown?
After.
Okay.
Yeah. Didn't make it very far,
I like what you said, though, about it. I get to play a lot of these patriotic concerts as well. And, when you see it on the calendar, you may shrug your shoulders for a second. But the second, like you said, you go to these small towns. I get to play in a bunch of tiny towns with the brass band. And anyone that's gotten to perform like Armed Forces Salute and just feels the energy in the room when you see like a 95-year-old man stand up proudly when he hears his military song and everyone applaud for him. I mean, there's nothing better than that.
Yeah. It's sincere, and we can have a long discussion about, the military and America's role in the world. And I'm not going to go there, but in that moment, that emotion is sincere. And I think I've done enough concerts where, and I'm sure you have too, where you're kind of wondering, is the audience, are they really paying attention? Are they here mentally? Or are they just here to be seen? And so when you have the feeling like, wow, I'm having a direct emotional impact on another human being, that's, you can't just throw that away.
I mean, this isn't a military story, but a friend of mine was on tour with a brass quintet, and they were in some, no-name town in Colorado. And, again, just thinking, oh, here we go, going to play this for the, 700th time or whatever. And this old lady comes up to him afterwards and goes, that concert almost made it worth living here.
Thanks.
It's like there's a nasty Valentine that floats around out there that says something to the effect of, as long as I have you, I'm strong enough to go on living with you. Something like that. It's like, thank you?
Yeah, exactly. So while you were in the Air Force, well, first of all, how long were you in the Air Force?
I just did a 4-year shift. The mindset, it was 4 years at a time, and the mindset that was spoke by many people was, you're either going to do 4 or you're going to do 20. Mm-hmm. Because once you've done 8, you're so close to that retirement that why not hang on and get the benefits? And I saw guys who were coming up to their 20, and they were really kind of freaking out, like, what am I going to do for a living? One guy went into HVAC, another guy was going to be a middle school band director, and they had kids. And I thought, if I'm going to make a blind leap away from certain income, I'd rather do it before we have kids and try and get myself set in some other way. And I had decided I wasn't going to do, the full run. So I figured just better to go now and make that another leap of faith, I guess, and then try and get things stable.
Was there something, and you don't have to go into great detail if you don't want to, or do, but was there something about the music making in the Air Force that, you weren't getting that you personally needed? Or what did you envision when you left? Did you have the idea of like, I want to go straight into university teaching?
No. Well, not really. Okay, so another story. We were doing a summer concert, and we were doing a medley called Grand Ole Opry, Our Country Heritage, which is, the acronym is Gooch. And Gooch had been done many times. And so we were there in a summer concert, and we turned the page, and there was a squashed bug on my music. And someone next to me said, oh, I remember when somebody squashed that bug, and started talking about this thing that happened, 7 years ago or whatever, and still using the same music. And I suddenly had this vision of myself in 20 years looking at that same squashed bug on that same arrangement. And suddenly, just like my brain said, I don't want to do this for 16 more years. And so it just kind of crystallized there. Yeah.
That says a lot about you. Because there's plenty of people that would be perfectly content with that stability, especially in the arts. And that's totally fine. But you strike me as someone that maybe through this experience and through your different positions, maybe you're always just kind of craving the variety.
Yeah.
And the exploring.
Yeah. There was a clarinetist in the band who had set up a chamber music series. And I felt, okay, that's how he's feeding his soul. Is he's doing the job, he's putting on the suit, he does a good job, does what is asked of him, but then he has this other thing that he does that to feed his soul. And I think that's a thing that we need to do. There's a piano colleague of mine down the hallway who has a cartoon outside his door, and it shows a concert pianist sitting down apparently to play a new concerto or a new piece. And the thought bubble says, I really don't enjoy this anymore. And then the note on it said, yeah, and then the note on it is something to the effect of, that's when you know you're a professional. And I think that's a sad cartoon because I haven't really, I guess it comes, you choose your mindset. If you choose to focus on the negatives, then yeah, you're gonna see the negatives. Susan Smith, who's second in the Nashville Symphony, said something really profound at one of these workshops that I heard. She said, when you're working with people for a long time, try to see the best things in them, not the worst things. It's natural to see the worst things in the people and get down about that. But it's a discipline to try and see the best things in the people that are around you. And you're going to be a happier person if you do it.
It reminds me a lot of orchestra life, what you're talking about. Just it can be a grind playing in an orchestra too, and you can choose to look at it through a negative lens of like, here we go, another Beethoven 5, that sort of thing. And I remember when I was at Interlochen, I was at the Arts Academy, and Joe Alessi came as a guest, and someone asked him, like, you have your dream job, like, you get to play in an orchestra every day. How is that? And he was very frank with us. He said, most of the time it's amazing. He said, every now and then you show up and say, I don't want to play this rehearsal. This is not what I want to be doing right now. But you do have to remind yourself there's 1,000 other people that are right behind you that would kill to do it. And so he was honest on all levels. And he said, when I get in that mode, I try to listen and I try to enjoy my colleagues playing. And then I also have projects, solo projects and recording and publishing and all sorts of stuff that I pour myself into equally so that I'm well diverse in my career. And that really stuck with me as I couldn't believe it, first of all, that someone would have anything negative to say about the career. And then he turned it into something positive by saying, okay, I'm not going to sit here and be negative. I'm going to find ways to, as you said, feed my soul.
Yeah. One time I heard a person say professionalism is taking a piece that you don't like and playing it so well that others are convinced that you really like it. And so
I love that.
And it's like you're not focused on yourself and your needs. You aren't important. You're a conduit.
Yeah. Just like great actors have saved a lot of really terrible scrips.
Yeah. I think a lot about actors not now on Broadway, but if you're doing a show, 8 shows a week, at some point, you're daydreaming while you're delivering those lines. You've done the show 1,000 times or whatever. And yet for that audience member, that's their first time. And they paid a good amount of money to have that experience. And so you're not thinking about your needs.
Well, I think about my friends who talk about the real greats on Broadway that, midway or deep into the run, they, instead of doing the daydreaming, they do little things that really only people have seen the show multiple times, like the musicians. Like Bernadette Peters, I heard stories about her. Every night she would improv something and you never knew when it was coming, and she'd throw something in there and just like crack up the band, and like not for the purpose of cracking up the band, but also to keep her fresh,
Right.
And that's why she's 70 something and still has a vibrant career,
Yeah. Who are the actors and the producers, the stars? I'm blanking on their names.
Nathan Lane.
The
Matthew
original
Broderick.
one?
Yeah, Nathan Lane, and who was opposite him?
Matthew Broderick.
So Matthew Broderick. So there's a great podcast by Mike Birbiglia, comedian, and he had Nathan Lane on, and he said that Matthew Broderick could say things under his voice that wouldn't be picked up as microphone, and would like provide running commentary on Nathan Lane's performance while we're on stage. So Nathan Lane would pause a little bit longer, and Matthew Broderick would say, "Oh, so that's how we're doing it tonight?" And apparently, he got Nathan Lane to crack up like almost every time, and Nathan Lane could never make him crack up. But I think that they probably had an absolute blast doing that.
Well, so basically what it's coming down to, the way you describe it, and I think I agree, of course, is at the end of the day, these kind of things are a choice, in every situation we're in. Sometimes the easiest thing in the world is to look at the negative. If you've been playing Cats for 20 years straight, 8 shows a week, it's going to be very easy to see the negative, right? But these little things of choosing to be grateful and then choosing to just find little aspects of your life that fulfill your soul, like you're talking about, is just really important, but actually literally takes effort, right?
Yeah, being grateful is a discipline that takes work, but it's so important. And our natural, I think it's just human nature to focus on the things that aren't right and that you need to make better. And then you can get yourself in a spiral going downward of negativity. And so you really have to work at being grateful for the things that you have and being hopeful. Those are powerful forces, but they don't auto start in most people.
Well, we're taught from a young age to be so critical too, to be self-critical, to be critical of music. Yep. I think it's only a short step away to go from critical to not grateful, Yeah,
that relates to a thing I do as a teacher that I call comparative praise, or conceivably comparative criticism. But one thing I don't love in a master class any master class I watch where a student plays and the teacher goes, the famous teacher in front of the audience goes, yeah, that was great. And it's just such a throwaway comment, I mean, I've caught myself doing it too. But when I'm teaching, what I love to do, I mean, no matter how good or bad it is on some universal scale, there's a moment that's better than another moment. And so what I like to do is zoom in and say, this phrase right here, I really liked. You seemed like it was singing more here. I would really wish, that was beautiful, because there's a way you could do that over here as well. And it's amazing how many times, the student will go, oh yeah, that's my favorite part. And so I find a way to say, what you did here was just really great. Or do you remember those attacks, how clean the articulations were in that exercise? Man, it'd be great if you could do that, in this. Or why do you think it isn't the same? And 9 times out of 10, they go, oh yeah, I'm just really tensing up right now and I'm not breathing. But I let them discover that on their own. So I think teaching is more like guiding them to make the discovery themselves, as opposed to just telling them. Because telling, it's okay, but it probably won't stick.
It's like a checklist that they will be trying to remember, rather than if you feel it, if you got there. It's the same concept of, I'm obsessed with my GPS. It's like, even when I know how to get to places, I don't know, there's something about my brain is just I want to know exactly how long, and I want to go the most efficient way possible.
Yeah.
But anytime I try to just figure it out, how to get someplace, I will always remember how I got there.
Right.
It always sticks longer, and I never need directions there again. But if I use GPS, I'll never know how to get there.
Right. There's a book called, I think it's called The Glass Cage, which is really fascinating. It's about our increasing dependence on automated technology and our increasing trust of it. And they tell that one story of a early plane crash where, the readings on the sensors were just absolute wrong, but the pilots did not use their common sense and just followed those readings and drove the plane right into the ground, or flew the plane right into the ground. But a wind sensor had broken off. And so it was telling them that they weren't going fast enough. And so they, instead of using good common flying sense, they just, that's what the sensor says. And so I'm going to, follow that. And it's really easy. I worry about this transition to self-driving cars because, eventually, I assume we'll get to a point where the things are completely reliable and almost never fail. But there's going to be that difficult transition phase where you have to pay attention because it's 99% good. But if you've got a 100-mile trip, there might be a mile in there that gets pretty interesting. So, but I think a lot of people, once the car's driving itself, you're going to start to become a passive receiver. Because it's tedious, especially if you're driving a long distance. And we've seen those YouTube videos of a guy in a Tesla sound asleep in LA traffic while the car's driving him home.
Yeah.
Oh, that's my dream, though.
Especially from a gig, that'd be nice.
Oh yeah, that kind of would be nice.
Yeah, I think about. I was literally just thinking about this today. That I saw a documentary somewhat recently, kind of a mini documentary about becoming a taxi driver in London. And they still, at least at the point of this documentary, still make them take tests on road maps.
And it's tough.
Very tough, especially London. It's very windy streets. And, New York is a little bit easier in that way, but still not easy.
Right.
But I don't think you have to do that in New York anymore. I think that they've allowed GPS, and they allow GPS in taxis in London, but they still make them take that test.
Sure.
And I was thinking about that documentary because I took a taxi once. I don't know why this all popped in my head, but I took a taxi once where the taxi driver didn't know how to get to the airport because his phone had died. And he's like, I don't know how to get to the airport. And I was like, you don't know how to get to the airport?
That's the glass cage.
There you go. Yeah.
So how do you turn off that instinct as a teacher, which I think we've all felt, where you know exactly what they're doing wrong, you know exactly how to fix it, you want to just tell them, hey, do this with your embouchure, do this, articulate this way. And we know that can have varying levels of success. And like you're saying, like I've had so much more success too by guiding the student to discover it themselves. Like, how do you shut that off? And what strategies do you use to help them get there?
I mean, at some point it's instinct, getting to know the student and finding out, okay, what do I think is going to work with this person? What do I think is going to work with this person? I like the analogy. In college, one of my jobs was a security guard at a residential complex. And so you walked around with this gigantic key ring and they had you Go around, open this door, go around. And so you're there with your 20 keys, trying different keys, trying to find what fits the lock. And I think that's just like teaching. I mean, you need keys to fit the lock. And so when a student is struggling with like wah, so well, let me try this key. It didn't work. Let me try this key. That didn't work. Let me try this key. That didn't work. You want to have a lot of keys on your ring, because what works brilliantly with one student, maybe in the very lesson before, and you're so excited, you try it with a new student, it's like, it doesn't even work at all. So you need to have a lot of approaches. The other thing, something you said, one of my sayings is that words are cages in which thoughts are trapped. So we say a word and we know to ourselves exactly what it means, but that word doesn't necessarily have the same meaning. I mean, teaching would be so much easier if you had a Vulcan mind meld. I could just play a lip slur, and they put their hand on my head and they go, oh, that's totally different than what I do. But even then, physically, we aren't all the same. And then there's also, cases where people describe what they are absolutely certain they're doing on the inside of their mouth. And then they do that study over in Germany with the MRI machine, and they look at the MRI and they're like, that's not what I thought I was doing. So, I'm a very big fan of the whole inner game thing, that as much as possible, we want to focus on the result, and our analysis should be in the sound. And then I think of direct physical explanation as kind of a Pandora's box. Like, that's not where I'm going to go first, and I'm going to try not to go there at all. Although sometimes you go there and like, oh yeah, that worked. Okay, good. But I don't like the complex physical descriptions of things. At least that's not my go-to, because there's so much chance for misinterpretation.
So many variables.
Yeah.
That I like that a lot.
Yeah, I do too.
Because that's the one thing that you can at least try to get on the same page about, as far as this is what we're going for, this is what it should sound like. I can at least record it and play it back to you, and we can talk about it.
Right.
But all those variables.
Well, when they're stuck and they can't get the results, then you have to open up the box a little bit and try.
Lift the hood.
Yeah, lift the hood a little bit, and some demons get out, but maybe a good little angel comes out too.
I like that.
I've had many arguments with colleagues about this, like where their lens is all through the physical, and they're great players. Yeah. And I'll argue. They'll say, yeah, I've been trying to explain exactly how it happens, and they're just not getting it. And I'll to one of their students, and I'll say, well, some people that really helps, and other people that really screws with their head. Yep. I think it's just like you said about the keys fitting the lock. You have to figure out exactly what is going to work for each student. I think that's great.
Another thing, this is a funny thing to do in a lesson if you teach a lot, is sometimes you're describing something and the student kind of goes, and you realize they're not listening to you. And so I'll just stop and say, hey, what did I just say? And they go, error.
Totally, 100%.
And I'm like, well, can you tell me more? So you have to find a way to keep them engaged. I mean, one of the things I do is I can come up with some really weird analogies in lessons, like just bizarre. But the stranger it is, the more likely they're going to remember it. So, I mean, just the other day, I had a guy, he was working on Ride of the Valkyries, and it was a Zoom lesson, and he wasn't holding out the long notes because, when we get to long notes, why count? And so I stood up. I don't know if I can demonstrate this here, but I was kind of like, like the horse who thumps his foot. I was like, bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-dum. And I just thumped my foot on the floor, and he was laughing. And I said, okay, your turn. And so he stood up, and he was thumping his foot on the floor. And I said, okay, now don't thump your foot like that, but in your mind, thump your foot. Boom. Rhythm was perfect. Because his mind had something to do, and because it was weird, I believe he's more likely to remember that when he goes off into the world of Snapchat, TikTok, and Instagram.
Your favorites, right?
The great mind erasers.
Wow. We got a couple sci-fi references going on.
Well, you're in the land of like where all the alien sightings were, right?
Oh, not quite. That's New Mexico.
Oh, it's New Mexico. It's the same. Is that a different state than Arizona?
I can't discuss that. I'm sorry.
You know too much.
Yeah. I can neither confirm nor deny.
Oh, of course.
So going through the whole process of becoming a professor and going through for those that haven't been through it before, and I imagine it might have changed as you got more things on your resume, but how was the experience when you first did it? Did you know what to expect when you first started applying?
No, first of all, I got exceedingly lucky because I made the final 3 on my first job application. And later, I had a professor say to me, "Oh my gosh, you got in the finals in the first application." I was like, "Yeah, is that not a thing?" And it was Kansas University, KU. And I was finishing up with the Air Force Band, and I sent in recording and sent in my materials, had no idea what I was doing. Wasn't even looking at jobs. I had a friend who said, "Hey, there's this job, maybe you should apply." And I interviewed, but they were just like the environment was just so mellow and pleasant. I was like, "Ooh, I like this." I could see doing this. I've discovered more recently, that not all academic environments are mellow or pleasant. But
what do you mean?
What are you talking about in review?
Oh, geez.
But that made me kind of like, that affixed it in my brain that maybe this is a path I wanted to follow. And I always loved teaching. So that was a natural thing. So that's after the Air Force Band, I went for my doctorate, because I figured that's your ticket to get in the door, and started applying to jobs.
So you started with University of Northern Iowa?
Yes.
And how long were you there?
3 years.
3 years.
And following me, there was a new trombone teacher, I think every year for about 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
That's where John Engelkis went to school.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Jody Davis.
Yep.
Northern Iowa. Lots of stuff to do there, huh?
Didn't Paul Pollard teach there for a minute?
He was, after me was Bruce Tychinski, and then it was Paul Pollard. And then I think Will Kimball was there at one point, and Nancy Vogt was there at one point, and I've lost track. I mean, it's been a real revolving door.
Oh, very cool. And then from there, you went to South Carolina, which is when I first learned about you. Is that when you first started the giant book collection?
There's a book that isn't published anymore that was the first one I wrote back when I was teaching private lessons in D.C. And it was to help kids with rhythm, because that was like a problem. And
good thing all kids have figured that out.
Yeah,
that's not a problem anymore.
We've sorted that out. So
Yeah.
So I just kind of like bound it myself and made versions for treble clef and bass clef, and would start selling it to some of my colleagues who were teaching private lessons. I don't have the files anymore, but I have the books, and at some point I'll probably go back and dredge it up. But more recently, the other books, the first 2 were with Ensemble Publications, and that was I like thinking of better ways to explain stuff. And I like being creative, and I like writing melodies. And so that all kind of combined in a way that I enjoyed doing it, and it was useful to me, especially because when you're in an academic position, they want you to, publish stuff. And so I figured, well, I'll try writing some books and see what happens.
Before we get too deep into the books, how long were you at South Carolina before you moved on out west?
Well, I was at South Carolina for about 17 years.
Yeah. I knew it was a hot minute.
I had a feeling I might be there for a little bit longer, but as things turned out, I ended up going westward.
Westward. Was it on your radar to be moving to another college at that point, or what, did this just kind of fall in your lap, or how did that all come to be?
It wasn't on my radar for a while, but whenever you change jobs, you're something you're moving to. And there's possibly something that you're moving from. And I don't want to go into any more detail than that. But there were in this case, there were both tos and froms.
Have you considered running for office? That was a beautiful answer.
That was very well put.
No, I don't think I could lie that smoothly.
I mean, but it's that's the thing. Because, I mean, as students, you see it every day. It's like, especially right after you graduate, it's hyper focus on just getting the job, right? And then, as we know, just getting the job doesn't guarantee that all your dreams have come true and you're fulfilled in every way and you're doing what you want to do, and the colleagues you work with, it's a good environment for you. Mm-hmm. It's different for everybody.
Sure.
So I mean, it's not a bad thing to explore, and to just because you're moving from one place to another it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you're just trying to find a place that works for you. And I'm sure there's so many, as you get older, right, there's so many factors, right, with your family and quality of life.
Yep.
I mean, what are you looking for now? Like what gets you excited now as a teacher?
Nothing. I hate it all. I'm burnt out.
This year doesn't count.
Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, you mean in general. Okay. I mean, I don't know. When I get down, a lesson lifts me up, and that keeps me going back. A good lesson. And I like my students. I hope they like me. But there's just so many moments in a lesson where, that moment that something clicks, or they have that epiphany, or they just suddenly have a little personal breakthrough. And that just lifts me up. And so I can be having a really not good day. And then I get into a lesson and I focus on doing what I do. And they don't always score, they aren't all great, but there'll be that moment. And like, yeah, that's why I keep doing this, is because it's exciting, when they have that personal growth moment. So I guess that's what keeps me going.
It makes me think about, and we don't have to fully jump into this topic yet because we definitely have plenty to talk about, but a theme I've seen pop up on the trombone pedagogy group a bit is, some people talking about what's the importance of performance education, music performance education, if there's not a certain amount of jobs in proportion to the amount of people majoring in it. And you've had some really wonderful answers on it.
Well, that's a question that haunts me a lot. And I can get really, if I get down, that's one of the things that causes me to get down, is like, what am I doing? I'm preparing these people for jobs that don't exist. I mean, and then you see someone, I won't say who, but certain people saying, yes, it's just a self-perpetuating business model where we're going to keep on selling kids a bill of goods and then collect their money and send them out in the world. I think one of the ways that I'm able to make my peace with myself, there's several, but one of them is that I've seen performance majors who did not go on in performance, at least not full time, but that performance degree was a way to get to where they wanted to be. So one is a concert hall manager at a major university. One is a director of educational outreach with a symphony orchestra. One was doing summer music camps for disadvantaged kids and, saw that and decided, I want to become a lawyer to help disadvantaged kids. And so it was a stepping stone. And you can't think of it like a technical school, like you will train to be a welder and you will weld. I mean, in this case, it's like the self-discipline it takes to get to a certain level as a musical performer and to get that bachelor's degree opens up possibilities that maybe you had not previously considered. That's one way I make my peace with it. The other way is I do talk to my students about, I tell a story about a certain trumpet player in a certain city. I won't say who in a podcast, but this individual is the first call sub with the orchestra, plays principal with the opera orchestra, at least when there was one, teaches adjunct at a college in town, has lots of students, always has the best gigs, and also works half days as a bank teller. So I ask these kids, okay, is that person a success or a failure in music? And I say, look, those who have the real salaried gig, that's the tip of the iceberg. But there's a lot of musicians who cobble together lots of, per service work and students, and they're actually, they live their lives and they're quite happy. And they're protected to a certain extent that their orchestra, their one sole source of employment, won't go out of business like the Savannah Symphony in Georgia. And so actually having those 15 or 20 1099s is a way of a sort of a form of job protection. So I say, look, if you're going to be a performance major, you have to set yourself up in a situation where you can do some teaching and pick up some gigs and be stable and still have enough time and energy to practice so that you can gear up and focus in on those auditions when they come around. I think the scariest time is, for a lot of people, about the time they finish their master's. So let's say they're 25, 24, something like that. And then there's that void in life for like, okay, now I don't have the structure of school anymore. What am I going to do? I still want to win that audition, but I haven't won it yet. And so there's like a window of 10 years, 15 years, where they're going to take their crack at auditions and maybe they're getting to the final 6, And I think about every time somebody wins the job and we have the anointed one, you think about the other 4 or 5 who probably could have done a very good job there, but they're heading home. And they're returning to their lives, even though they almost tasted, that desired, that sought after victory. And how do they keep their spirits going? I talked to a guy who was did a lot of shows on Broadway, was never a lead or anything like that. And at one point, my daughter was all about, I'm going to be on Broadway. It's going to be great. This is middle school, And I talked to this guy. I said, so how do you make it on Broadway? What do you do? And he said, I think the main thing you need is to accept repeated and constant rejection. And keep going and not stop. And that's, you've heard the joke about I had to lose 30 auditions before I won one. Not that doesn't happen with everybody, but I think there's something about that, keeping your spirit going. So in going back to your original question, how do I make my peace with the performance majors? At the end of the day, it is a bachelor's degree. To a non-musician, if you say I'm a music performance major, you might as well say I'm a 4th degree wizard, because a non-musician has no idea what that means. And I saw that. I had a student who was a trombone performance major and an economics major, and he got a summer internship, and he was talking at some, get-together with a woman who was very high up in the Federal Reserve Bank. And she somehow saw that he also did trombone. And all these, young people were sucking up to her, trying to big favors. And she latched onto him and said, well, my son plays trombone. I love music. And they talked for half an hour and totally connected, completely outside of music. But, that was sort of his hook. And he got a very nice internship and kind of, went on the path that I think he was intending to go on all along. So to someone who's not a musician, if you say I'm a trained musician, that's pretty impressive to them because they don't understand it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see more and more employers actually get a little excited about that. I mean, like you said, it seems like voodoo to some people, but there's a lot of employers that if they do know anything about music and know the dedication it takes, the amount of self-learning involved and working with groups.
Oh, yeah.
And sensitivity to others and the complex thinking and levels of empathy. They crave. There's some employers I see that just want to hire musicians all the time when they can.
Even when I was an undergraduate back in a certain decade, I won't mention the 1980s, I lived in Hartford, which had a lot of insurance companies. And at that point, computer programming was very new. And there wasn't a wealth of computer programming types applying for jobs. And there was a known thing at the Hart School of Music that you could walk into any insurance company and say, I'm a music major at Hart, and they would hire you on the spot and train you themselves because they'd had such success with the patience and the complex thinking.
Thanks, Charles Ives.
Yep.
Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
I think that it would be interesting to dig into your books. You kind of touched upon why, but when did it become kind of a focus on specifically lip slurs? Why was it not articulation? Why was it not, well, you did rhythm, so I won't mention that, but why specifically lip slurs?
Any book probably starts out with the question, why hasn't anybody done this yet? And I like trombone players. All trombone players love doing lip slurs. And, there just wasn't, there was the violin book that some people mentioned, but there just didn't seem to be a lot of lip slurs books out there. People had the same, you look at people's routines and basically you see all the same lip slurs over and over and over and over again. And so I thought, man, you could do something a little better. You have some antecedent consequent phrasing in it, a chance to breathe, a little variety with slide positions. And I've asked myself that question. It's why has no one done this yet? And then I went to, shoot, I guess I'll do it. And I didn't know if it was going to succeed or fail, but I was just what the heck? I'll write something and people like it or they don't. I will say that, the over the time I was writing that book, I was playing them all and rejecting a bunch too, that didn't make it into the final cut. But boy, my jobs have never felt better in my whole life. I mean, I was doing lip slurs for 6 hours a day.
Wow.
and it's wow, I should wear a cape and have an S on my chest. This is amazing.
The first book, it obviously, I don't know. I don't know exactly when you published it, but how quickly was it a success? Because now it seems like it's a part of the standard repertoire for education for trombone players.
What was the first part of that question again? Sorry,
when it was
someone was calling to order another lip slur.
Yeah,
book.
exactly.
I have a secretary that handles all that. So.
No, I don't know when it was published, but how quickly did it become a success?
Well, the first, I guess, officially published one was the Clef Studies book, and it was kind of a slow burn. Partly I was thinking I need something for my 10-year file, and it caught on, and it just kind of, it's now putting along at a pretty decent pace, but nothing amazing. But, I get the royalty statements each year from Ensemble Publications, and it's about the same every year for years now. So it never caught on like wildfire, And then lip slurs caught on significantly more. And I don't recall if it caught on quickly or slowly. I mean, it really helped that I think I sent Joe Alessi a free copy and he wrote some nice words about it. And that has a way of perking up people's attention. And the reason I chose Ensemble Publications very specifically was I knew they're connected to Hickey's. I knew that Hickey's had the biggest booth at all the shows. And I knew that, Chuck DiPaolo, who's great, would always make sure that his products were visible. So I thought, well, what's the best way to be visible at shows? Well, if I can get in with Ensemble Publications, then that's the way to go.
So with a combination of you believing in your work, you doing really good work, it's not only that, it was being smart about finding the best way to get in front of the most eyes as possible.
Absolutely. I mean, I see a lot of guys will show me a book that's a new book they're releasing. I think that's great. And they ask me for advice. And I say, especially now, the hardest thing is how are you going to get anybody to notice? That is so difficult, and I've seen a lot of good ideas. And then I don't know if the book sells or not, but there's just the marketplace of ideas is fortunately more crowded. Not fortunate if you're trying to get a book out there.
Did you ever consider like self-publishing or, for someone like just starting, I mean, what's the most cost-efficient way of going about it? Because like you're saying, you have to balance right. If I do it myself, obviously you're going to save the most money, but no one might see it.
So the first two books, Cleft Studies and Lip Slurs, aren't published to Ensemble, and I get a standard rate of 10% per book sold, which is, I started to think, well, that's not great. So every other book since then has been self-published. So that's in answer to your question. I just self-publish now. Then what was the second part of your question?
Well, that kind of relates to it. I mean, do you think you could have self-published if you hadn't had that company market it first?
No. Well, I mean, I could have. I don't think it would have caught. I think it's like trying to start a little fire in a campsite. Maybe the published book is like your kindling wood. And these days, Ensemble's still quite good, but he's selective in what he takes. It seems like Cherry Classics is probably the most active in putting stuff out there because I'm a reviewer for the ITA, and another thing from Cherry Classics, another thing from Cherry Classics, another thing from Cherry Classics. I mean, and then Cimarron is a reasonably good one to try and get started. So I'd say maybe align yourself with a publisher for that first time to get people interested. Yeah.
So I'm like holding back my fandom as much as I can right now, but I've lived out of the Lip Slur Melodies book. I can't even tell you how many times. And what I like about your books in general are they're really good books when you have no idea what you want to practice. You can pick up one of your books and be like, I'm going to get something productive done.
Right.
And I can just attack like if I don't have a lesson to prepare for or an audition coming up or a concert coming up this year, it's a perfect way to do it. And so when you made this Lip Slur Melody book after the Lip Slur book, did you see what I like about it so much is it's making something that it's very easy to be very technical, but you're making it through a musical lens. So you're accessing that other side of your brain while you're doing technical exercises, which is you see so many people get bogged down in the wrong side, right? When we're trying to connect these things that are helping to make us better work when we're actually performing.
Well, I love writing melodies. I mean, that's where it starts I get as much joy. I'm like a very, very slow motion jazz improviser. Do not ask me to improvise jazz. You will not have a pleasant experience. But my mind is working the same way really slowly. Like I'm creating melodies and I'm sometimes I think I'm just happiest when I'm creating melodies. And so in this case, it was just melodies that had lip slurs, and that's like kind of a little puzzle. Okay, how can I make a halfway decent melody that's all natural slurs without getting really weird on a ton of alternate positions? Because, what's that going to do for anybody? And I just loved writing that book. I think I had more fun writing that book than anyone I've written. I wrote it faster than just about anything I've ever written too. And it came to life because, there's some lip slur melodies at the end of the original Lip Slurs book. And over the years, guys would say, hey, those lip slur melodies, you should write some more of those. And suddenly I thought, well, yeah, I should write some more of those. And so, man, I knocked that thing out like I think it was in one summer. It's just like and my brain, when it comes to writing a melody, and this is true with any creativity, is at first it's like a car's engine won't start. You're like, I don't know. let's start with major third. Okay, that's okay. What's next? And then the brain goes, oh, so we're going to do this now. And then it's just like opens up these floodgates, and I'm writing down almost down as fast as I can. And then I'm just like going about like I'm driving my car, and the brain's like, well, I've got another melody for you. Here's another one. How about this? What about this? And I'm like, stop, I'm driving right now, So once the car's engine is running, it runs pretty fast. But then when I stop, it goes back into hibernation mode and doesn't want to start again.
You're getting into like a flow state.
Yep. Oh, I love that flow state. That's a good book, the book Flow.
I've read that.
Yeah.
I read that during Traviata.
Yeah.
It's a good reading opera.
It's a great reading opera.
Not as good as Butterfly. Butterfly is the best reading opera.
Okay.
It's like 400 measures of build up, and then you just chord, and then another like 20 minutes off.
Yeah, that's about right.
So I have just a bunch of questions I would love to just try to get in,
Sure.
if that's cool with you, Nick. All right. Just to touch on it, or, spend a longer time. What did you envision trombone pedagogy being, the fabled Facebook group, if anyone's not aware, versus what it is today?
It started out with 13 people, and it was talking about trombone warm-ups, and that was the name of the group. And then it started to grow and became trombone pedagogy. And then, I think Facebook is just such a useless thing. But at least when I go on Facebook, if it's trombone players geeking out about, teaching stuff, well, that's okay. That's kind of enjoyable to talk about. But like any group that grows and starts to grow really fast, it's inevitable that it's like a lot of other forums. Like when someone asks a question and I'm looking at all the answers, there's a lot of the answers, maybe I shouldn't say this in a podcast, but a lot of answers I just ignore because, I'm Bobby and I'm an 8th grader and this is how you're supposed to breathe. It means like,
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Bobby. So, and then we had some nasty dust ups. There was a lawsuit, which, if you know about it, you know about it. And if you don't, I can't speak about it. But there was a lawsuit connected to that group. I was worried for a few days I was going to be sued because I was the founder of the forum. But it was what some people said on the forum that got them sued in a defamation case.
Whoa.
And then there was, I think there was an explosion at one point over, I had to ask a moderator to step down, which I hated doing because I think she's wonderful, but I think there was a line being crossed. And then I think we were touched to a certain extent by the Black Lives Matter movement. And the fact that at that point, our moderators were 3 white dudes. And I thought, this is not good. And I can now see why this is really bad. And so I started working we need a bigger moderating group, and we need diversity, cultural diversity, gender diversity, ethnic diversity. And it also had become such a full-time job with these huge fights brewing that like, if I left Facebook for 3 hours, I'd come back and this giant fight had broken out. And people were calling each other Hitler and so on. I was like, whoa, I don't want to what happened? This whole thing blew up. And people were like, why isn't the moderator stepping in? It's like, because the moderator has a life. And I'm not being paid to do this. So I got a panel of 9 other people. I thought it was a really good panel. And then I just stepped down. I said, okay, I'm done. I'll still participate in the forum, but I'm not going to be a moderator or an admin or anything. And my stress levels in life went down a lot. Because it got too big, but there's still good stuff there. And there's also a trombone professors group on Facebook. And if I go onto Facebook, like 90% of my time is in one of those 2 forums. And there's some very, very good conversations that do take place. And pedagogy has been very good lately too. I haven't seen people picking fights too much.
Yeah. No comment.
Moving on.
But you have to, especially with any large forum, you have to dig through the junk, but there are nuggets of gold in there if you're willing to look. And so, you can look at, it's like what we said about having the job. What are you going to focus on? The stuff that's not good or the stuff that's good? There's good stuff in there.
Absolutely.
Randy Campora will come in and make some great comments.
Yeah, he's great.
And so I'm going to go past Bobby, who's in 8th grade, and look for Randy. And then that's where I'm going to focus.
Well, it's not just 8th graders, unfortunately.
Well, no. Yeah.
But I mean, if obviously it's big and the world is big, and yeah, we all play the trombone, but there's so many different people that do. And I'm still a believer that there can be positive discourse in this world if it can be done in a respectful way, it can be done in a fact-driven way, and not trying to just like look like you won the conversation.
Right.
And as much as that can be encouraged, you know, we can do some great things.
Yeah, just the other day, someone said something, and I said, I disagree, and this is why I disagree. And then they came back, you know, saying blah, 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 blah. And I thought, you know, what they said was thoughtful, but I was like, I'm disengaging. I have no need to. I expressed an opinion. You know, you're not going to change my mind. I'm not going to change yours. There's no point in continuous. So I think learning to disengage early and not having any of yourself invested in a disagreement is a really important life skill now.
Yeah, a couple summers ago, though, someone posted on the Contrabass Trombone Lovers and Appreciation Forum.
That's a thing?
Yeah. And someone asked about slide and valve combinations for the Entry of the Gods on contrabass trombone. And I chimed in saying, it depends on the tuning system, blah, blah, blah. And, you know, I said on the German system, if you do this, blah, blah. I just gave my thoughts on it. And he said, someone said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever read. Can you imagine Paul Pollard thinking that? And I was like, well, I played it into the back of Paul Pollard's head in the Met. But then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to engage in this, and I'm going to step away. You know, this is not worth it.
Disengage.
Yeah.
But I think it's still on the balance is more positive than negative.
Absolutely.
100%.
It's done a lot of great things. If you could give any advice to a young person that just finished their DMA and they're wanting to do what you do, I've had friends write in about that I was talking to you and just, how do you get the interview? How good does my recording need to be? How long should my CV cover letter be? I mean, all these little things that sometimes people aren't really taught.
You need to be the key that fits the lock. So, like, when a job says we want this, this, and this, then you have to almost like, you need to have a one-to-one matchup. They said, we need some experience with teaching music theory. Then you better show very prominently in materials that you've done that. And, you know, if we want some jazz experience, you need to be the person they're looking for. And a lot of people, they don't do that. They just like, here's my stuff, deal with it. Now, I will say I've had some applications where it was kind of a laundry list, and I did exactly what I told people not to do. I just applied, and it turns out that, you know, these job descriptions written by committee, sometimes there are things on there that aren't that important. But as much as possible as a DMA person, first of all, as a DMA person, by the time you're done with your DMA, it's really very late in the process. You should be starting much earlier. You should be looking at job announcements. I've actually been reaching out to people who've been hired in the last 5 years for academic jobs, and people are starting to send me their CVs. One guy was kind enough to send me his CV and the letter he got from the school and his job interview itinerary. And I'm starting to try and build up a folder so that these students can not just see any CV, but I want to see a CV that person got hired. And got hired recently, so they can see, okay, this worked for this person, this worked for this person. So that's very important. If you have an application that's nothing but student, it's going to be very hard to get on the short list. I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. When you see bachelor's, master's, doctorate, I want a job. It's like, yeah, man, that just doesn't. I mean, you got to have something in the real world, because we get lots of people that went straight through as students, and maybe they're great, but you need to have some. And I've seen people who do it like they get a grant application from a state, and they set up an arts program. It's like, okay, so you did something. It was concurrent with your student studies, but it was a thing you did beyond what was on all the syllabi. And so that'll get a committee to perk up and take notice. Much more important these days is diversity and equity. And more committees are wanting diverse candidates, and they're wanting diversity statements. So you really got to think about what meaningful work you're doing. And so don't do it just to put it on the resume. Do it to make the world a better place. So maybe you're going to teach some lessons ad hoc, a pro bono in a school that's, is a diverse school. But you can say you're helping to build a program like that.
And that can be a good way into, because I always see a catch-22. I see the same thing with like actors in New York City, for example, or anywhere trying to get their SAG card. Like, you can't get your SAG card until you've been acting, and you can't act in a SAG production until you have your SAG card. So it's like you see so many college applications that say collegiate teaching experience required.
Right.
And so many students are like, how am I supposed to get that?
Yep. It's a curse, and there's not an easy button to push. I think be very aware of any opportunity that's out there. If I were a young DMA person, I'd probably be keeping a spreadsheet of all the colleges and who's teaching trombone at the colleges and how long they've been there. That's a little morbid, but you want it. And I know that when I started to get serious about college JAP applications, I was just memorizing names of teachers at schools and what they were doing, so that I could just say, this school, oh yeah, that's so-and-so is teaching there, so-and-so is teaching there. I just wanted to be aware of what's going on out there.
I think that this can transfer over into performance as well. Like knowing who's out there, knowing what jobs might be open in the next 5 years, these sort of things. I mean, and it's not just about putting that spreadsheet together. It's about taking the initiative and instilling the drive in yourself. I think it's more than just having a spreadsheet in front of you. Yeah.
Well, especially on bass trombone this next year.
Wow, it's going to be a big one.
The floodgates are going to conceivably might open.
They are. They're going to open.
Yeah. So it's going to be a real interesting time. So on the bass trombone merry-go-round, that brass ring is coming around. And you better be riding your horse real well.
Yeah.
Okay, I got some rapid fire questions.
Yeah, sorry. I don't talk short.
Oh, no. Those were more lengthy ones. These are maybe a little quicker, but they don't have to be. Advice to your 18-year-old self.
Not everybody else is 10 feet tall. You don't have to play so loud. Spend a lot more time listening to music. Put that into your daily schedule. Force yourself to get in there and listen to music like crazy.
Have you ever felt pressured to play an Edwards trombone?
I almost bought one. I was on Shires for 25 years and switched last March in the very end of the before times. I was at ATW. I was there and I played an Edwards from Baltimore Brass and I played a Greenhoe from Baltimore Brass. And I just did some side-by-side listening comparisons with people and also what I felt. And the Greenhoe was edging it out. I was like, that's it. I'm buying a Greenhoe. I almost bought an Edwards. And people ask me that all the time. Like, dude, why aren't you playing an Edwards? I was like, I don't know.
It was easy.
Yeah.
Low-hanging fruit, Sebastian.
Low-hanging fruit.
Sorry.
More low-hanging fruit. You can only take one of your etude books onto a desert island. Which one is it?
Wow. This is assuming I've forgotten all the other ones.
It's like my favorite child.
Yeah, that's tough. See, I'm always most in love with the book that I wrote most recently. And the most recent book is this book, 60 Vignettes, which after this podcast, I'm going to offer you guys a free PDF version of it. So.
Oh, really?
Fantastic.
I was just thinking when you said that, I was like, oh, that's one I don't have.
Yeah, it's a new one. It's only a few months old.
Yeah.
So maybe that.
What's it about?
It's little half-page tunes. Each one appears in 3 keys, and it's just some of them are like obvious rip-offs of those Arbin tonguing exercises that everybody loves, and some of them are just like, let's get legato and sound going, and then I design them so that you can play them in tenor clef. So the A example goes up to a high C in tenor clef, the B example goes up to high D, and then the C example is low range. And bass trombone has a different key sequence. And then they get harder. And it's just, I think trombonists we're melody starved.
Right.
When you see the horns and the oboes, and they get melodies all the time. And poor little us, how often do we get the tune? So I think we really crave melodies, and I just want to write a little more set of like simple little character pieces.
And think about just developmentally, the average kid starting when they're like 10 or 11 in band, you're going to be playing, fifths and whole notes and half notes for the first 3 years, while the trumpet players and clarinets and flutes are learning how to phrase.
Yes. Yeah.
And we never move on.
Nick's still stuck.
Hold on, run.
Yeah.
Okay, last question from me. What are you, because we were talking about this topic, so I wrote down this question while we were talking. What are you most grateful for now?
Health, family's health, a semblance of job security. I mean, those are dumb things, but I think at the end of the day, I'm breathing, I'm not sick, and I have a secure place to live. I've never had food insecurity. I've never wondered where my meal is going to come from. And I think that stuff can become invisible to you. And so I have to make it visible and realize I'm glad for these things. Be glad for all these little things that we don't think of, because they're not little, they're very big. Nick, you can relate to that with the health,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So a question I like to ask is, especially because you're a professor, what's something that students need to be doing more of?
Singing.
Singing. That's the first time we've had that one.
Singing musically.
Right.
Singing musically.
Sure.
And
Wait, what's the difference?
don't make me demonstrate, man.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, it's amazing in lessons they're struggling with something and say, just sing it. And then they go, da, 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 da. And I was like, no. Sing it like you mean it. Make it beautiful. And they sing it, and then they pick up on the trombone, and it's like, I think we have inside our brains a singing brain, and it goes to sleep. And we start to perceive music as, put the slide here, do this. And the singing brain has gone to sleep. And when the singing brain wakes up, and you're really, like Arnold Jacobs says, singing it in your mind, then it's amazing how the trombone just reflects that.
Sure. That's great.
Oh, that's a great answer.
Yeah.
Man, this has been a fantastic talk. I mean, it's been really nice to finally talk to you and pick your brain a little bit. And we've covered so many interesting topics. I can't wait to share this with everybody.
Thanks.
And I can say with confidence that when Sebastian says he's a fan, you should see his copy of your lip slur, your first lip slur book. It's pretty dog-eared because he carries it everywhere.
Well, I actually took a photo of it and tagged you in it once.
I think I remember that.
It's like the cover fell off and it was like all, and you're like, yeah, I need to start covering these in strap or Kevlar or something.
Yeah. Or buy a new one, take it to FedEx and get it coil bound.
Oh,
$4, $5 maybe.
there you go.
There you go.
A fresh copy.
There was someone who dressed up, I don't remember who she was, but she dressed up as the Lip Slur's book for Halloween one year.
That's a new level of dorkdom right there. I love it.
And I was like, is that a scary costume? Or
I hope you're going to like a trombone studio party because everywhere else, no one's
they
having
have no idea.
in college one time, I went as a New York Times crossword puzzle. I had
Really?
the questions on the, I think the questions were on the front and then the answers were on the back, and I had a pen. And all night long, people were like, I can't remember, maybe the questions were on the back and they were like staring at my back, which is really fun for making you paranoid. You're like, what? Oh yeah, you're looking at the questions, and then they'd write the answers down.
Well, the real question is, who is the editor of the crossword?
I don't know how to answer that in any way that's
I mean,
entertaining.
the only answer is Will Schwartz.
Oh, of course, obviously, the puzzle master.
Yeah.
Did you see that? I read once that I was talking to Pete Sullivan once about this. The person, and I could be wrong, we'll double check, but the person that invented the crossword puzzle was actually a violinist in the Pittsburgh Symphony.
No way.
And Pete Sullivan was like literally obsessed. That's like all he does when he's resting at work. And I was like, did you know someone in this orchestra invented it? And it was just,
Wow, that is very cool. Huh.
so musicians can do lots of things.
Eh.
And if that's wrong, I'll just delete everything I just said, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Brad, thanks so
thank
much
you
for
so
hanging out
much.
with us.
Yeah.
Been really, really cool talking to you and picking your brain. And we hope to see you in person and maybe at one of these festivals if not too many people are crowded around you buying your books.
Well, the challenge will be to go into the instrument room, but we can only meet and chat if somebody's playing bolero
Well,
or ride.
Bolero or ride, those
As loud
guys
as you
too,
can.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say Hungarian march and ride because those go bass and tenor. So
Or bass trombone, loud pedal tones. We gotta. It's you know how hard that is to find at a trombone convention. So
I'm always fascinated by the people that just want to like, I need to test my lip trills immediately, as loud as possible.
yeah,
It's like, that's like the top of your priority list. Like, how often do you need to
that's
do
how you
that?
pick a trombone. You know,
sweet trombone, but does it trill?
no Stairway to Heaven.
Little tight.
Yeah, exactly. The lick.
Da-da-da-dee-da.
Download I'm very happy we interviewed Brad. I met him a number of years ago, and he was a really great guy, really easy to talk to, but he even exceeded my expectations, gotta say. And my expectations were very high.
Yeah, I didn't really know what to think. I came with an open mind. Obviously, I have a great respect for the amount of work he's put out. And, you know, I've seen him a lot on the trombone pedagogy page, and he just seems really on top of everything.
Yeah, the slur master himself.
I'm sure he would love that name.
There's probably a word in German that it's just one word and it means like the perfectionist of the lip slur.
Yeah, and it's like 20 syllables. Can
Umlaut.
our German audience help us out with that? Is there a word for that?
Meisterschlagen.
He probably just like cussed or something.
No, I said master hitter. Or master hitting.
Germany's like our second biggest listener base, I believe.
Because you
So
got a
shout out
German
to all
right
those
here.
Germans.
You got German
Yeah,
right
I'm
here.
sure they're tuning in just to hear your German perspective on everything.
Schwartz.
I could introduce you that way.
You could, yeah. Hey, my family's from Baden-Baden. Well, going way back.
Oh,
Still got some distant relatives there. So, Brad Edwards. I feel like we all are going to get a little bit smarter from hearing him talk. Lots of little blips and blurbs of wisdom, and it's just, you can tell he's thought a lot about teaching, how to be better at teaching, obviously playing, with his books that he has out. Yeah, he's a very thoughtful person, very, very fun to talk to as well.
yeah, I really enjoyed just seeing his philosophy on enjoying the craft of what he does, and approaching every student differently, because every student is different, and he was just right on top of every question we had. He's a great compliment to the trombone community. We're lucky to have him. And he's advancing however you feel about his books. Maybe you don't care for them. Maybe you live out of them. He's doing a lot to further along etude books and method books of trombone players. Because, there's a lot of stuff we've been playing out of for like 100 years, which isn't always a bad thing, but it's always good to like keep the art form moving forward.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts about that, actually. Number one, like, if you haven't done this already, you should really read his books, like read what he writes and suggests on how to work out of them. I think it's very good advice on, like, in all etude books should have a little bit of that involved. Like, here's what I had in mind as the composer of these books. Here's how I think you should work on them. And I think he really touches upon a lot of very important things in those little blurbs he has describing the book. Also, the other thing is, I thought about this before we were going to interview him. He has very quickly, his books have become staples in our trombone community as etude books in basically every studio in the country. That's hard to do. That's really hard to kind of break in and be like in the same sentence as Blazevich or Bordoni or, Tyrell or whatever you consider to be the standards.
You just described my dream dinner guest list.
Is Slama there too?
I haven't spent much time with Slama.
Yeah, I just have fond memories of Slama, so for me it's important.
Speaking of the trombone pedagogy page, and I really appreciated his thoughtful comments on it. There is one thing I did want to address that, we always post quote photos basically to advertise the podcast. That's one of the places we post little pictures of our guests with a quote from the podcast, usually some sort of inspirational quote or a nugget of wisdom. And so our last one was from Randy Hawes. And basically we posted a quote. He said, "Go out and contact people who are doing what you want to do for a living and get lessons. Do it now. There's no reason to be shy about it. Go see how far you have to go to get where you want to be." And it got tremendous response and overwhelmingly positive. And really, I think the crux of the quote may have been slightly misinterpreted by some people. There's a few people that commented things like, this kind of quote makes it feel pressured to get lessons if say you don't have enough money to do it. Advice like that makes them feel like you have to be born rich to be successful in this field. And if you listen to the podcast, which if you haven't listened to, please do. The whole point was him encouraging people that felt shy to do it, that there's no better time than the present to go out and discover what you're kind of looking for. And if you're curious about what it takes to be successful in this field, there's nothing better than studying with people that are doing what you want to do. I think that's all he's saying. I don't think he's trying to say like, go broke doing this or you have no chance,
Yeah, the truth of the matter is lessons are so important to what we want to achieve on the trombone or, any instrument really. And this even transcends music, I think. It's a bigger picture thing. But within our field, let's stick with trombone. We have to go take lessons. We have to hear what, like Sebastian said, what the people out there doing this expect and what they are doing on the trombone and what their tricks of the trade are, so to speak, like little tricks on how to improve this excerpt or this etude or this solo or whatever. And we have to be able to figure out how to do that. And, no one's saying, okay, you got to go take lessons with absolutely everybody. The other thing to bring into consideration is it doesn't always have to be money to buy lessons. For example, I know of a prominent trombone teacher. I won't say his name because I don't know if he wants to advertise this. He would work out with students sometimes who just didn't have any money. Like, all right, come over and babysit for 1 or 2 nights or something like that. Or I have a shed that needs painting. If you help me paint it, I'll give you 6 lessons or something like that. Exchange of services really is what that comes down to. And I think also on top of that, like myself, I'll speak for myself here. I've had people come up and say, I really want to take a lesson with you, but I can't afford anything right now. I've tried to work out, okay, what about a payment plan? What if you gave me half now, half later, or something like that? Or sometimes I have worked out small tasks I needed done. I needed a bunch of copies of a bunch of music at one point, and I had a student make copies for me because I just didn't have any time. I said, if you make these copies for me, I'll give you a lesson. So, we worked it out. I've worked it out with multiple students this way. So the important thing to drive home is you got to get out there. You got to meet people because at the end of the day, it's about networking as well.
Well, yeah, that made me think, like, when I applied to the summer trombone workshop, Heimavet Sir let me babysit his kids because I couldn't afford the application fee.
Mm.
And that was one of the most important things I ever did. Yeah, I mean, I think saying like needing to be rich is a little bit over the top, especially some of these people posting. And it was just a handful of people. I'm not going to like call them out or anything, but they're going to big schools that probably cost a lot more money than having a single lesson, which we were supporting. If you look at it, I mean, there's not really any line of work anywhere where, sure, having a certain amount of money is going to be an advantage. And until every single person has the same amount of money, that's going to be the case in some way. But that being said, if the only prerequisite to being successful at the trombone was being rich, then every single person that was successful would be only the richest people. And I definitely know that's not the case. So to me, the underlying factor, the most important variable in your success is your ass in the practice room, your personal agency to work your butt off. And there's more free resources today than ever before on YouTube, and the amount of recordings out there and pedagogical resources. Through the Trombone Retreat alone, we gave a free week-long seminar last year online. We do this podcast for free, which I hope people are finding educational. It's out there. And I would just ask these people, what is your solution? Because, I mean, you can't expect people to give away their time for free, away from their families. This is their source of income to support their lives and that they spent money on. And at the end of the day, this is just encouraging getting more information. Some of the comments went on to say it's, irresponsible to not level with students about job opportunities. And
that's not very fair, I don't think.
Yeah, like once a student knows the reality of the situation, then they can make a decision how far you have to go to get what you want. That's exactly what this is advocating. That's how you learn about how far you need to go, is by seeing the level that's required. And yeah, sure, things cost money. So if you can't afford it, we're not saying go spend your life savings on lessons with Joe Alessi. We're just saying every now and then it's going to help. You don't have to do it because the most important thing is you, but don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, and if we really boil down the idea here, and let me back up a little bit, actually. I said that's not really fair, assuming that Randy or any of us aren't talking to our students about the reality. First of all, someone brought that up in the comments as well, that, well, do you know that Randy's not doing this? He is doing this. I think as a teacher, it's our responsibility to do this. I am very clear with my students about the battles and how difficult it is to break into the scene. I'm very aware. I had to do it myself. And I also try to offer as many resources to do that. Say, hey, call this person, meet them, take them out for a coffee, even if you can't afford a lesson, to try to get your name out there. This is the biggest thing, because it doesn't matter where you went to school, doesn't matter how many degrees you have. People don't know who you are unless you put yourself out there. And you can put yourself out there online in the form of recordings, but you would be better to take that recording and send it to someone and say, hey, and be honest. Hey, I'm trying to break into the music scene in whatever city you're in. Here's some of my stuff. I'd love to meet up with you, play some duets sometime, whatever, something like that. That's a jumping off point. And I think you'd be surprised how many people would say, yeah, that's great. Call me back in 6 months. I'm a little busy right now. Let's get together. Some people might say, look, I just don't have time. If you want a lesson, you can hit me up. But I would say that a lot of people are willing, give you 30 minutes of their time, because they might be looking for subs too on their show or their gig or whatever it may be. Or, maybe they have some work to throw around. Who knows? So the number one thing that this quote is that Randy had is trying to get out there is go meet people. And I can't advocate for that enough. I think students, to be completely frank, do a lousy job of doing this for themselves. And the number one reason is I think they're nervous too. It's hard to put yourself out there. It really is, but you got to do it. It's very important.
Yeah. And it comes to a common theme. Like if you graduate school and you think, oh, well, if I'm just really freaking good at the trombone, things are just going to work out. Like people are just going to offer me things and contact me. You go in an audition, that'd be good. But otherwise, like a lot of professions and like we talk about a lot on here, it's the personal relationships you have with people. That's the most important thing, in addition to your fine playing and your trustworthiness. And so, I have full respect for these people that made these comments, but I think it was slightly misinterpreted. And I just think the crux of the argument isn't really that strong. When at the end of the day, yes, getting lessons with a professional, it's hard to go away from. It's probably going to help. Do you need to be rich to have a single lesson? I look at it as an investment. Sure, money is money. If you don't have it, you don't have it, and that's respectable. But at the same time, I don't see a solution of just everyone should be giving everyone free lessons, because I just don't see that translating to be possible on a mass scale. But there are resources, and the most important thing, again, is not money. The most important thing is you being determined and working consistently and following your dreams and being hungry for your goals.
And another big lesson to take away from this is this can apply to so many things out there. I'll talk to students say, hey, did you catch that New York Philharmonic performance last week when they were doing Mahler 5? No, I couldn't afford it. And I'm like, did you even try? I mean, first of all, there are ways to get into concerts for free. There are. Yeah. I'm telling you, I went to school in New York, and most of the concerts, I would say 90% of the concerts I went to, I didn't pay for. There's something called stubbing in, or that's what we called it, at the intermission. You ask for people that are leaving, because a lot of people leave at intermission for some reason, and you say, hey, can I get your ticket stub? They know what you're doing. You're going to go take their seat. But if they're going away, most of them are like, oh, here, I don't care.
Oh, man. You know what my favorite thing was in New York when I was a grad student there was we got free rehearsal tickets for the New York Philharmonic.
Yes, yeah.
And there was no better way of starting my day. There would be no one there. And I get to just sit wherever I want at 10 in the morning, 11 in the morning, and just listen to a dress rehearsal. And it was the same as the concert, and it just woke me up every day. And it was free.
Yeah.
And there's $10 student tickets. I mean, everything. You can usually ask your teacher if they play in the orchestra or know someone that can get you a ticket. Last minute student rushes, they're there.
Yeah, there's ways. If you're willing, there's a way. And I think that's what this all comes down to, is really just kind of don't stop at, this costs money, I don't have money. Be creative about it. Try to figure out how to get in the door for cheaper or for free, when it comes to concerts, or talking about going back, reaching out to people. There's a lot of things that you can do that don't cost any money. Writing an email doesn't cost money. So
it's an investment in you.
Yep.
At the end of the day. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. If any of those people want to reach out to us, I'm happy to talk further about the subject. So I had my first rehearsal with the opera yesterday, and I have my second one I'm about to head out to now in about a year.
Awesome.
And it's cool. I won't go into details about the piece, but I do have a slight bone to pick.
Oh,
because it's on my mind. Bone to pick. That was our backup podcast name. There's probably already one called that, if I'm not mistaken. But okay, trombonists, I think we can all sympathize with bad mute changes. Can we please spread the gospel to every composer we know that there's a certain amount of time needed to change mutes, especially to take a mute out or to switch mutes? The opera I'm playing has 6 mutes required.
Okay,
And
6 mutes: straight, cup, harmon, bucket, plunger. What else?
Is that 5?
Yeah.
Okay, so technically 6 because there's harmon stem in and harmon stem out, and we were talking about it, and the best way to do it is to have 2 harmons,
Right.
one with stem in, one stem out. Little hack there, so because it takes a while to push it in and out. So yeah, 6 mutes, and I'm having to get like a table next to me, and it drives me insane. It drives me crazy. That going along with other pet peeve that composers could do. It only drives me crazy when it's something that could be found out very easily. Like things that are impossible on the trombone. If you would have just had a 2-minute conversation with a trombonist, you probably could have figured it out. Another thing I hate is glisses that aren't possible.
Right. Yeah.
You know, that's not hard to learn. Google image search like a trombone slide chart.
You know what? When I was at school, my friend was minoring in composition, and he brought me the book that they were teaching out of at the school. And he said, "Hey, I want you to look over the trombone chapter and just tell me if." He was a bassoonist, and he said the bassoon chapter is a mess. It's not good information. It's all incorrect. The trombone chapter said the trombone has 6 positions, in that the bass trombone has 5 positions.
Okay.
And that you shouldn't write rapidly between B flat and B natural because of the distance. And I was like, oh my God. Like, so I went to the composition department chair and I said, you have to find a new book. This is unacceptable. You know, this is incorrect information. He could not care less that it was wrong. And I was just like, this is why we have things like the mute change problem in glisses that don't work. Look, Bartok Concerto for Orchestra, huge exposed B natural to F gliss, and they had built a freaking trombone, a special trombone just for those glisses. It's in that and in Miraculous Mandarin. It's like,
and composers aren't going to learn unless we communicate these things.
I used to sub a lot with the American Composers Orchestra, it's a smaller orchestra here in New York that's completely dedicated to new music being written now. And there's a panel it's all composers that are prominent in the field, and they work with up and coming composers and pick their music to be read by the American Composers Orchestra. So the way that their season works is there's only 1 or 2 concerts a year, but there would be like 10 sessions throughout the year on top of that. And those sessions, you would read through pieces and then record them. And then you'd have a Q&A session with the composer where you could say, hey, in bar 6, you wrote this gliss and it's not possible. What an awesome idea for composers. They can hear directly from players about what works, what doesn't. And you could hear the gratitude that these composers had for this opportunity to hear directly from players, like what works and what doesn't. It was awesome. I wish there was more of that in the world.
Oh, man. It just makes me think of so many times where it's so simple. People are afraid of asking questions. I don't know why. I think the smartest people in this world ask questions. And it makes me think of another opera. I was playing bass trombone on an opera we premiered a few years ago. Again, I will not say the name. But there was I showed my bass trombone part to Jeff D, the bass trombonist of the Pittsburgh Symphony, and he just started laughing. There was like cup mute below the staff, like pedal notes at like 200 16th note double tonguing stuff. It was just, I mean, one conversation. I had to rewrite like the whole part. I should get an arranging credit on that thing.
Oh man. Yeah. I remember playing something that had rapid jumps of minor 23rds. It was like, people, like, and I was like, oh, this is not going to happen.
And there is one thing, in conversations, and, I spent a long time in a group that focused on premiering new works. And there is something to the composer advancing the technique of the instrument and challenging you in new ways. And that is important for the evolution of the instrument and making the players rise to the occasion. But there's some things that are just like physically impossible sometimes, or just totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
This is therapy for me today, Nick.
Yeah.
I just need to get this out before this rehearsal today.
Like we had something written for us recently at the ballet that had a lot of like open close harmon stuff. Wah. And it was all below the staff in the trigger. So I was like, I went up to the composer and I was like, this is impossible. And he goes, why? And I said, you have to hold down a valve. I can't do the wah-wah at the same time as the valves. And he he was flabbergasted by that. He's like, I don't understand.
But on my computer, it works fine.
Exactly. Eventually I understood because I took him into the pit and showed him what I meant. And he's like, oh, wow, thank you for telling me. And he changed the part. It was great.
Nice.
But yeah, for another thing to take away from this is if you experience that and you do have access to the composer, don't be afraid to talk to them. What's the worst that can happen? They ignore you and you, okay, well, you tried.
And you're like, well, I'll just change your part for you. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider leaving us a rating and review on iTunes, as it helps us a lot. If you want to leave a question or topic you'd like us to discuss, we'll answer it on the podcast. Follow us at Trombone Retreat on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter, and our website, tromboneretreat.com, where you can also join our mailing list. Also, feel free to shoot us an email at tromboneretreat@gmail.com, as we love hearing from you. On Instagram, follow Nick at basstrombone444 and myself at js.vera. And as always, never forget,
Retreat yourself.